Well, hey, welcome to episode 2 of the Co-Lead podcast. Danny and Jamie Schulz here with you, and
Yes.
we are so excited to have you joining us today. Pastor Jamie, how you doing?
I'm good.
You doing good?
Kids are back in school. Last couple of weeks, our oldest son is turning 17 tomorrow, and he started a Running Start program to get some of those college classes while you're still in high school.
Yeah.
So today's first day.
They call it free college.
And that's what we as parents call it. Yes. How are you doing,
I'm doing good.
Pastor Danny?
Fall is good. We call each other pastor on the podcast, so everybody knows. Fall's good. Fall in Spokane, especially September in Spokane, is my favorite weather of all year long.
Yeah.
It's like spring is awfully wet and it's warming up, but then just before you know it, it's summer and it's hot. And then this September month in Spokane is just golden, 70 degrees.
Yeah.
It's just so great.
We went out on Friday last week and went to an orchard, apple orchard, and they have a little diner there where we just sat out on their patio, ate food and read books and enjoyed September.
Come on. It's the best.
Yeah, it was
Love
amazing.
it. Well, hey, what we want to do in this episode is we thought it would be cool to pull the curtain back on our co-lead cohort that we do for couples that co-lead together. So far, we've done one of them back in February of last year. We're planning on another one coming up that same week, up in February this year. And it's a 4-week cohort. Sorry, not a 4-week cohort.
I was going to say.
It's a 4-day cohort.
Yeah, 4-day.
That we love. It was a huge win. And so we wanted to just pull the curtain back and talk about how we came up with it, how it's come about, and just kind of flesh it out a little bit. It's one of those things that's hard to describe in a short amount of time. So I'm glad we get some time to kind of talk a little bit piece by piece through it. But tell me, just from our experience doing it last year, what did you love that took place at the 4-day cohort experience last year?
Yeah, for us, and I think we should talk just even a little about the story that led us to doing this cohort when we first went through it. But I didn't really know what to expect. We brought in a trainer to take us through the curriculum. We had been part of an online group that was talking about the future of the church and what we needed to be focusing on. And it just seemed like a good next step. And when we got in the middle of it, I think at some point I just started to realize like, oh, wow, we are clarifying specifically what we are individually called to, and that is really going to impact what we are called to together. It felt like, when you're at the optometrist and they keep clicking on those lenses until all of a sudden everything comes into focus and you can see for the first time, and that's how it felt. Like I can now see where we're supposed to go at the level that I hadn't been able to see in the past, and that I think was the greatest impact for me, and it's really affected the way that we've led together. But maybe you should kind of back up even before that and tell us like how we got into it as a church team. The first time we went through it, it was with our staff at Sun City Church. I think there was 8 of us at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So to kind of rewind a little bit, the curriculum that we walk through is really a journey of discipleship that goes over those 4 days. It's called Unique. It's put together by the Future Church Company. And we got connected with Dave Rhodes, who ended up facilitating for us. But we were on a cohort with them in the middle of 2020 when
in the craziness.
Yeah, all the craziness was going down. COVID was hitting. And so many pastors across the nation were really refocusing on discipleship because so much was being taken away on a Sunday morning factor, right?
We're being forced to rethink everything.
Yeah. So, our services are kind of shut down. We're going online only, recording and all of that. And really, pastors across the country realized just how unrooted so many of their people were, how much more dependent on a service we were than dependent on Jesus. And so everyone's scurrying for resources around discipleship and how do we interpret what's going on. And everyone and their brother doing 10 million webinars every day,
Right.
trying to train everyone on what we're supposed to do. And I remember we just jumped on to one of these webinars with this group of guys, and they're talking about how to see the pandemic, and they started inviting pastors into a cohort based on the book Future Church, and we got involved with that and learned a lot around discipleship. But toward the end of it, one of the tools that they recommended for training leaders in vocational discipleship, like how do you make disciples not just at church through groups and teams, but how do we get out into our community and make disciples in the places where we work and eat and play and all of that. It was this journey called Unique.
Yeah.
So then we decided, hey, let's fly out the author and trainer, Dave Rhodes. Let's fly him out to do it for our staff.
Right.
And talk a little bit about how the experience was for the staff.
I mean, I think all of us maybe would echo what I was feeling, where we were just like not really sure what we were getting into. We had been impacted by the conversations that we'd been having around Future Church and reimagining what church structures should look like beyond just Sunday morning. How are we discipling people, and what does it look like to create? I think some of the language that they were using at the time is like a lower room. If you were to imagine a house, like a living room where you are inviting people that are far from God, which is something so core in us. One of the things we love about Sun City Church is the outward focus. And so they were talking in this language of let's create the living room environment, but then let's create the upper room, like take them up to the place of discipleship, and really that, picture imagery of the upper room where the disciples were after Jesus had left them and the Holy Spirit is being poured out on them, and they are just experiencing a brand new kind of life. And so all of us had been just impacted by that thinking, the conversations we were having around it, and allowing God to just stretch our imagination for what life was going to be like on the other side of the pandemic. And so we were excited, but we didn't know. And then it was a lot. It wasn't like, sometimes you go to something and it feels like there's a lot of breathing room, a lot of discussion. This felt like immersive, like you just jumped in on this 4-day experience, and it was like, turning on the fire hydrant. It was like water was just like pouring in all this information. And what it did is take you on a journey of looking at your story, your past, and really seeing God in it, and then starting to connect dots on the way that he's designed you, and then turning your focus to envision the future. And I think for all of our team, it was liberating. Like them coming to the conclusion, and I would say this about my experience too, of wow, this is how God designed me. And until this moment, maybe there was some questions of what part do I play on the team, and should I be a little bit more like this person over here? And for all of us, we were getting clarity around our distinction, why God created us that way, and how that made our team stronger because of it.
Yeah.
And I think we all went to a new level of confidence in our unique role, and then also appreciation for the other people on the team and the things that maybe rubbed us wrong in the past or just kind of annoyed us about, like, man, you're so different from me in this. We began to see it in a different light and go, that is so important to who we are.
Yeah. I remember some of the members of our staff just sobbing as they realized that it wasn't that they didn't fit. It was that they had something unique to bring.
Yeah.
And that they belonged. And not only did they belong, but they were bringing in a unique nutrient that our team needed to thrive and prosper. That was just so significant. We had some just incredible Holy Spirit mountaintop moments. And I remember one of the deepest ways that we were impacted was in thinking through our co-leadership.
Yeah.
There was so much that we were digging into around who did God design us to be, and what now should we do in light of our divine design? And then what does that mean for the two of us together and how we're leading the church? So much revelation around that we quickly began to connect the dots and say, this experience would be so good for husbands and wives that want to pastor together.
Yeah.
It was, as we were already starting to do some workshops and sessions at conferences about co-leadership, and we were writing on it and posting on online and having a lot of conversations about it. We'd even recorded some early podcast episodes pre-pandemic.
Yeah, that just kind of went away in the middle of the pandemic.
Kind of felt like the conversation was a little off. But, we had started working on it, and then we went through this experience, and it was like we couldn't really imagine having this conversation and leading people to better co-lead together without this foundation that we had received. It was so impacting.
Yeah. I remember talking to Dave Rhodes about it as he was taking us through and just telling him, as a female leader, I feel like this is so clarifying to just understand. I think if I was to look back at my journey in leadership, there would have been a lot of points where I was mostly trying to be you in leadership. And because I hadn't found confidence in my own role, there was a lot of trying to emulate and kind of catch up. And we've talked about this in some other spaces, but one of the things that tends to be there for female leaders is they don't have as much opportunity or mentorship. Sometimes there can be kind of a lack of resources that are poured towards female leaders. And so I think that created just this follow in Danny's footsteps and do what he does. And I hadn't really given the time to reflect, how has God designed Jamie to be different than Danny? And what do I bring to this? And so I remember talking to Dave Rhodes and saying, this is huge for me. I feel like for the first time, I'm getting clarity, that focus around this is why I'm supposed to be co-leading, why there's both a father and a mother in the house, and that that's important. And my voice is significant. And I remember telling him, I think that for female leaders, this would be so helpful. And then what he told me in that conversation is every time we do this, it's female leaders that honestly have the biggest reaction to it.
The biggest breakthroughs.
Yeah. Where they're just feeling like it's so significant for them. So it was enlightening about what a great need it is, and we became passionate, I think, at that point to go then we want to help bring this to female leaders and co-leaders specifically.
Yeah, so we went through with our staff, and then we began to be trained by the team there in order to facilitate these, and we brought our leadership college students through, and then we did several small groups, and then again last year we did our first cohort with co-lead pastor couples all coming to Spokane. And man, it was just a beautiful time, such incredible breakthrough in couple after couple after couple. The stories that were coming out of that were so significant. And then even staying connected and hearing about their progress and their confidence and just the clarity that has taken place in their lives since going through. It's just something we're so passionate about. So what we wanted to do for the rest of this podcast episode, again, is pull back the curtain and just talk about some of the highlights, what takes place. What are we talking through, walking through when we're looking at this unique curriculum, 4 days, like you said, of very intense information and really thought work and reflection work,
Yeah, even less information and more processing.
Yeah.
Because it's guided reflection.
Yeah, again and again. So some teaching, but lots of reflection and inventorying and articulating. So we just thought we'd walk through piece by piece and just talk about some of the highlights and things that we go through during the time together. And one of the early things that we do in the unique journey is we help people uncover their passions. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you want to just reflect on your own experience or maybe some of the things that you've seen in other people, but let's just talk about some of the ways that, clarifying and naming areas of passion, why it matters. I think most people would think, I already know what I'm passionate about, but talk a little bit about that journey.
We do a reflection guide where we look back at our story and just some of the high points, some of the low points, and how they impacted us. And then, really alongside the Holy Spirit, we're just looking for what has made us the people that we are. And what's amazing is how those pain points produce so much of our passion.
Right.
And being able to connect the dot of the reason why this is such a big deal for me is because it comes out of my own story. And it was not having that person in my life or experiencing that brokenness one of the things we talk about is life lies and the things that the enemy has used against us, that we become passionate about helping other people expose those lies and overcome them so that they can experience victory. So there's a whole process of looking back and just seeing your story through a new lens, a redemptive lens. And that's so powerful. Every person we brought through it, it's amazing to see how they were thinking about their story one way and then spending that time learning to look at it through that gospel redemptive lens. It just changes the way that they see everything. And, for my story as someone who grew up in the church, it was like I was looking back and like, it's not like there was all these really big kind of tragic moments for me, but it didn't begin to make sense why I'm so passionate about female leadership. And some of the things that I walked through that I really wrestled with, I think I've talked about before, the very first time that I ever led a co-lead small group, there's lots of guys that just got up and a co-ed small group. There's lots of guys that just got up and walked out in the middle of it. And I remember just like so thrown off by that. Like, what is happening? And then the wrestle of trying to understand scripture and understand, like, is this thing that I feel God calling me into actually what he's calling me into? Because there's some people that believe that I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing and even aspire to any level of leadership in the church. And so all of that pain points has really created this passion in me to speak to and raise up female leaders.
Right. And what we see in now having taken several hundred people through the unique journey is so many people, they are carrying baggage from their story. And the church has long helped people, go through processes of healing and freedom and forgiveness and let your past go and give that all to God and walk in new freedom and new light. Yeah. And all that's awesome. We do a lot of that stuff at Sun City for sure. But what I love about Unique is it not only helps you get some freedom and some forgiveness going when it comes to the low parts of the story or the hard things that you walked through, but it begins to help you interpret it correctly and then see why God allowed you to walk through those things and now the treasure that you have on the other side because of it. And that's where you begin to name these passion core values and say, like, this, when it all comes down to it, this is something that is me and I'm never going to let it go. Yeah. Like one of the things we talk about with you a lot is you have a huge core value of not excluding people. Yeah. How do you say that? Do you have a way that you articulate that?
Yeah. For me, one of my core values is there's always room at the table. Yeah. And I kind of don't like green rooms for this reason. And it comes out of the pain of my past of being a female leader and feeling excluded. Feeling like there was times where I was not allowed in just because of my gender and feeling like I want to make sure everybody has room at the table. God invited into, those first 12 disciples, just the most motley crew ever, like people that nobody else would have chose. And he made room for them at his table. And there's this passion in me, like, I want to make room for other people at the table. I want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity.
Yeah. And so like sometimes in our parenting, you'll be talking to our kids and they're planning to go hang out with their friends or whatever. And then you'll strongly come on, well, hey, make sure that you're not excluding anybody. Make sure that your siblings are allowed to come. Make sure that everyone gets the text message. Like, you can't do things that are going to exclude other people. And then every once in a while, I'll remind them, now remember, this is a core value of your mom. And that clarity came from doing this process individually. And when you realize something really is a core value for you, in one sense, it gives you the freedom to just stand on it and be who you're going to be. In the other sense, it gives you some grace as other people run against maybe something that you're disproportionately passionate about. And so you can remember, like, I'm making this a bigger deal than the average person would.
Because it's part of my story.
Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So those things are gold and it's so powerful. I've really loved it. Anything else you wanted to say about passions?
I was thinking about one of yours and the story that I think goes with it of really our journey of once we got married and knew we were called into full-time ministry and just the struggle that we had with finding somebody who would invest into raising us up.
Totally.
And we just felt like we hit wall after wall. There was like a season that we were trying to get hired at the church that we were volunteering at, and they just wouldn't hire us for anything. It was like we're just rejected and rejected and rejected.
I will do anything.
Yeah.
Any job.
Yeah, and it was hard. We just felt like there'd be some people that were like, no, you're not what we're looking for, and other people that like, I just don't know how to help you. And what that has maybe created in your leadership.
Yeah. I think a lot about the stewardship responsibility that we have toward every leader, every person that's a part of our church, and especially anybody that says, I want to be involved in church leadership. I'm so passionate about building pathways for young leaders, for any leader, any age really, into ministry, some of them into vocational ministry and full-time ministry and church planting and all kinds of things like that. Because I remember us feeling so capped and boxed in and uninvested in so many ways. And now I'm like, I just want to make sure that no one has that experience.
Yeah.
Let's do whatever we can to steward these lives of these young leaders as best we can.
Yeah. And I think what it does is help you just understand why you are the way you are and where you should put your time. Because for us, we're recognizing in all the different things that we have to do in life, there are some things that just have got to be at the forefront because it's how God designed us. It's part of our story. It's part of our passion. And there's a lot of things that we can raise up other people to do. And there are some things that we are specifically called to do.
Right. So you get all this clarity around your passion, and you come out naming some core values, which, if you're listening to this, maybe you've done some of that work, maybe you haven't, but it's beautiful to put together a new framework around it and re-articulate it, and it gives you such clarity moving forward. And then there's this huge section of the journey that's all around defining your God-given abilities.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that a little bit.
And this is where there's several tests that are part of it. Personality tests,
like
strengths finders, assessment. Yeah. And we're using all the data from that to really put together a picture of not just what are you passionate about, but what are you uniquely equipped to do.
Yeah.
Like God built you this way, and you're good at seeing things different than other people see them, or you have a skill that you bring to the table. And that's really fun. That was helpful for our team to begin to understand, again, with all the options. It feels like there's just so many things to focus on in leadership. What are the things you should be focusing on, though?
Yeah.
Begin to really kind of hone in on those few things.
I can remember, several years ago when we first encountered the Enneagram and read Ian Morgan Cron's book, The Road Back to You, and how just revolutionary that was for our marriage.
Right.
And then our co-leading, kind of understanding personality types. And I had done a little bit of learning around Jungian psychology and personality types, but I hadn't gone very deep. And I think in my own pride, I kind of thought everyone should be like me. And what leadership is
reproducing yourself.
Yeah, reproducing myself,
exactly
for the sake of the kingdom. Just influencing people to think like I think and work like I work and lead like I lead. And I remember the Enneagram was just so powerful in beginning to see different people in different ways. And when I reflect on the work we do in Unique, it's like that experience of learning the Enneagram for the first time, except for maybe with 4 or 5 times the angles. Like it all still feels very sticky and memorable. You don't get lost into acronyms you can't remember, but you do start to see things with clarity and these layers of, okay, so here's how my personality is. These are where my strengths are. Here's my gifting from God and how He built me to be. And when you start to see those all combined, you do get this sense of, I am uniquely made different than anybody else in the world. And this is how God wants me to take my abilities and use them for the kingdom. And then, of course, the beauty is, how does that fit with my spouse in a co-lead situation? Now we've got this incredible depth of understanding around all of these different abilities that have been so helpful.
Yep. And the moment we began to see that, I think it made more sense, even the way that the next area that, we go into in context, the way that we should lead in context. Because instead of just like, hey, here's all the different things that we have to do as leaders. You take this part, I'll take this part. We then began to think through the lens of, you are uniquely designed for this. You're good at this. You're passionate about this. It only makes sense when it comes to the org chart that you would be leading in this area and I should be leading in this other area.
Totally.
So it changed the way we were thinking about even dividing up leadership and the way it should work.
Yeah, it has changed the way that we lead meetings. It has changed the way that we do sermon series design. It's changed the way that I think about pioneering new areas of the church and what you do versus what I do.
Yeah.
And all of that is really, before doing this work, I think we just defaulted into traditional ways of thinking about it, kind of traditional
like kind of
gender
role.
roles.
Yeah.
And then doing this work and so seeing with clarity, here's what God made Jamie to be great at. We should release her to do that. And I should stop trying to carry things that maybe I'm not as good at just because I'm a man. Like, let's just actually put our strengths to play in the right spots. Like,
Yeah.
that was so significant.
And it's really affected the rest of our team. I was just teaching our college students actually this morning. And as I was teaching them about how to lead good discussions in their teams, one of them raised their hand, and I'm kind of giving them questions like, here's the questions that should be in your back pocket anytime you're going into a setting where you want to draw out what's going on in the scenario. And one of those questions was, why are we doing what we're doing? And one of them raised their hand and said, Danny told us last week that you were going to give us that question. They said, this is your role in the organization. He's always answering the question, what are we doing? And you always are answering the question, why are we doing it? And I just thought that was fascinating that they are actually, as college students, and they're in their first year with us, beginning to just understand the distinction of our leadership too, because there's clarity in us. Like,
Right.
our team's getting clear, because we're clear, and then that's trickling down into the rest of our church.
Yep. And that is really personality driven.
Yeah.
So I'm a very, what is right? What are we doing? Let's get the practical, rubber meets the road. You really are more conscientious, thinking through what's the motivation in her heart. Why are we even doing this? Do we need to uncover the hidden why that's derailed us and we're on the wrong path? That's way more who God made you to be in your personality. And it's so important that we,
Right. And it's separate from male and female.
Right.
Again, it's specific Danny and Jamie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Personality driven. So passions, abilities, and then the third area that we really pursue is this whole area of context.
Yeah.
So like, where do you work best? And who do you work best with? What kinds of people do you work best with? And then what types of organizations do you tend to thrive in? And man, I remember that being really significant for me. What did you take away from the stuff we learned about when it comes to context?
I think probably the biggest revelation for me was about family on mission. And it was the first time I really began to dig into that Greek word oikos, or I know there's other ways of saying it.
You're not a Greek scholar?
No. But just the idea of the family is beyond just your biological family, and it's the people that it's your spiritual family that you are on mission to extend the kingdom with. And that really affected us. It was like the thing that and all of a sudden it's like the puzzle piece fits.
Yeah.
Like that thing in you that's like, all of my life, this is what I feel like I have been longing for, pursuing, and it's like somebody just put it into words.
Yep.
And all of a sudden I saw it. And that's really affected the way that we do ministry. I remember early on when we first started in youth ministry and we're trying to figure out what's it mean. We had young children and asking the question, how do we balance ministry life and family life, and somebody telling me like that's impossible. There's no balance. And still grappling with that question, like what's right, and family on mission helped me finally get clarity around this is what it's supposed to look like.
So good.
Here's how we help our kids live into the mission of God for their lives.
It's huge. Discovering a good theology of place, that God has us where he wants us on purpose, and we're actually placed here with roots, and we're affected by the place in which we live. Like, the place really matters. And as you said, the people really matter. I remember thinking through, God has called me to a specific people, which that seemed a little bit more intuitive for me. But not only that, but God has called me to work with certain people to reach those certain
Yeah.
people, certain types of people. And I got to know that so I can be looking at, okay, so who's supposed to be on the team to reach the people
Right.
that I'm called to reach? And then, of course, what kinds of organizations, should be involved in. All that was so good. How about this whole idea of naming your calling? Like, I remember halfway through the cohort, we have this huge celebration and we're able to just name and articulate the call on every individual in a unique way. Talk about that.
Yeah. One of the things they do with this curriculum is they have you sum it up in just 2 words. And these 2 words articulate specifically for you, here's what I'm called to do. And then you have a sentence that goes along with it that kind of explains it for everyone else. So they can kind of get a picture of what it is that you are called to. But it's those 2 words that are unique to you, that mean something. They inspire you. In fact, we actually made signs for all of our staff with those 2 words, with a sentence, their core values, and they hang in their office. So my 2 words are mapping treasure. And what that specifically means for me is that I am discovering the goodness of God and leading people into it. I'm mapping that treasure, discovering it for myself, but leading other people into it. And it's around that place of identity and purpose and calling. So tell us your 2 words.
Yeah, my 2 words that I articulated several years ago now are maximizing fulfillment. And that speaks to getting the most out of every situation, getting the most out of every person, and ultimately maximizing the fulfillment of calling. And I just want to make sure I get to heaven and get to hear that well done, good and faithful servant, and steward every single thing that God's put into my hand to the best of my ability. And so that's why I'm alive. I want to maximize fulfillment and help other people maximize fulfilling the call of God in their life.
Yeah. And there's this moment as you go through the curriculum where everyone stands up.
Yeah.
They read that and then everyone applauds. And when we did it for the first time, I think it's probably one of the most significant moments that we will look back on our life and go like, wow, God showed up in that space. So tell us about it. I know for you, it was really impactful.
Yeah, it was a huge mountaintop. I know when we went through with our staff, hearing each one of these staff that we love so much, they really are family to us. Hearing them declare, this is who God's called me to be. This is the unique, crafted, articulated call on my life, and here's my core values, and here's what I bring to the team, and what I'm supposed to do with my life. Like, it was just so moving to me. I just sobbed as I listened to our staff declare who they were in Christ. And then again, as we were with the cohort that came last February, listen to these pastor couples, man and wife, husband and wife, standing up and declaring individually, this is the call on each one of them, and thinking about how God weaved them together. Oh,
it was so emotional.
Yes. Everyone's crying.
Yeah, you can't help. You're just seeing it. What a beautiful design of God that he brought this couple together in this time, in this area for the extension of his kingdom. And there's just nothing like it.
That's so good. So that's, you're kind of halfway through the experience at that point, and then you round the corner into this whole, okay, so now we know, here's what we're created to do. Here's what I'm passionate about. Here's what I've been gifted and graced by God to pursue. And here's the context for which I pursue it in, and then name it all together. And then you kind of take this pivot into, okay, so how do I live that out?
Right.
And it all starts with this tension between planning and dreaming, because some people are huge dreamers and think out into the future, and others are like, hey, I need to know what's on the calendar this week.
Yeah.
And we're talking about how both of those things, both long-range dreaming and then short-range planning, are both discipleship competencies. Basically, you got to be able to do both, especially if you're a lead pastor couple listening to this, man. Like, you have to have long-range vision for the future, but you also have to have rubber meets the road plans. How am I going to execute this week? So we begin to start talking about some of those tools to help you do good at each one of those disciplines.
Yeah, and that's radically changed our life. Like, it leads you through a process of envisioning, here's your 3-year goal. What is God calling you to? Where do you want to be? What's your 1-year goal? Breaking that down into life rhythms. And I just don't know if there's very many things that have affected our life as much as this has. This rhythm of every 90 days, setting a goal. This is going to move me towards where it is that God's called me to go. And it's the most important thing that I can focus on right now. And here's the daily rhythms that I'm engaging in order to help me get there.
It's like the first half is this looking back and looking into the present and saying, this is who I am. And it's all a result of where I've been.
Yeah.
And then the second half is about looking forward and adopting this operating system to operate with.
Right.
Where there's all this, here's the scoreboard of how I know I'm winning in a healthy way. Am I winning not only at work, in church work, but also at home with family and in marriage, and also just personally in my relationship with God and pursuing life-giving hobbies that are replenishing and rhythms of rest that lead into rhythms of work. I know that was huge for us, just thinking around resting into working, and how now trying to maximize both of those has been massive.
Yeah. And for us to be able to hear each other say, here's what I feel like God specifically called me to, here's what I'm adopting, just the opportunity then to partner with each other in that, in a place of prayer, in a place of coming alongside and encouraging, arranging life. I mean, I think about, it's been 2 years since we started this process, and it hasn't been like, every 90 days is incredibly smooth. There are times when we just reset and go like, everything kind of went haywire. Let's just kind of start over again. But I just think about the traction and momentum that has come from these last 2 years. And it has really been just life-changing for us. It's really helped us see each other's calling really different and get focused and move towards what God's called us to do. Co-lead, I think, is actually a result of 2020 and what we went through there.
Yeah. It's like we were starting it and we kind of had a start, stop. And then we installed this operating system. And now it's just so amazing to know with clarity, here's what we want to do long-term, what we feel called to make a difference in the world. But then to have the operating system that gives us the power to put one foot in front of the other and accomplish things for Christ, which we already had some disciplines in that area. Like, we planted a church, like we're able to get things done. But even now, operating as lead pastors and seeing other things come to life, so much of that is the result of some of these disciplines and these rhythms.
Yeah. Yep.
It's been a whole lot of fun. I would just say, as we wrap up this episode, that maybe the greatest benefit to going through the cohort would be the power of clarity. Mm-hmm. Like things move from kind of being fuzzy and unsure, and you're just operating like you know how because things fell into place, to this sense of clarity that in some ways is just incredibly powerful and fun. In some ways it's painful because you see things that are a problem and it kind of disrupts you and you're like, we got to fix and work on stuff. But man, it gives you everything you need to be able to move forward and change and align yourself with God's call and God's plan.
Yeah. And the unity, I think, that follows that clarity. Like we were able to come into greater unity with each other because we could see clearly.
Right. I think the level of valuing the gift, the call, the individuality on each one of us has gone to a whole new place. And I know for me, I just appreciate you more in these last several years than I did before that. I look back and go, man, I feel like I took you for granted a lot. On public podcast, will you please forgive me?
Well, thanks. I don't really know how to respond to that.
You could say yes.
Yes. Okay. I think the same for me. I don't think I really could clearly see the difference between you and me. And because of that, my own insecurity, I think, kind of kept me from being able to appreciate what you brought to the table, because I felt like instead all my focus was on trying to be you and feeling like I wasn't succeeding. And so when I was able to go like, nope, you don't have to be Danny. You can just be Jamie. It gave me more confidence. And then it also helped me to just appreciate your role and what you bring to the table and how we co-lead together.
Right. It's been such a win. Hey, as we wrap up, I want to let you know that the dates for our next co-lead cohort come up in 2023, and it's in the month of March. I said February before, but it's actually March 13th through 16th. So should be getting to be better weather. Last year it snowed in Spokane, so we said, hey, let's push it out a little bit and try to avoid that heavy snowfall, although the snow was beautiful. But March 13th through 16th, and we still have our introductory price of $9.99 for the cohort, and that's per person. But man, I'm telling you, it's a small environment that has space for just 8 couples. And so the amount of coaching and attention and breakthrough that comes to every individual is unlike anything that I've ever been a part of. And I can't say, there's never been a time where I looked back at it and went like, man, I missed that money.
Yeah.
It's just been multiplied blessing and influence in our lives, in our church, in our leadership, in our own discipleship and leading others. I just think it's some of the best investments we've ever made. And we're so honored to be able to make that available to other couples that are learning to co-lead together.
For sure.
Plus, we had the fun night at our house with the dinner and asking all the co-lead questions.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
It was actually one of the favorite things of the whole cohort last time was we just had people come over to our house, crowded them all into our little living room. And we just said, like, let's talk co-leadership, nitty gritty, down in the dirt. What's it like? And they loved that Q&A time. It was really great. Just talking about what does it look like? How do we flesh this out?
Yeah. All the questions, org chart, how do paychecks work? What do you wish you had done differently now that you know what you know? Like all the stuff. So that was super fun. Anyway, we would love to have you come out to Spokane and join us for this upcoming cohort in March this year. And if you have more questions about that, or just want more information, just go to our website, wecolead.com, and click on the link that says coaching. And then you can click on join the cohort, and it'll show you everything you need to sign up or get registered. Or of course, feel free to reach out. We'd love to connect and hear more about your story.
Yep.
Anything that you want to say?
Nope.
All right. You guys have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you again really soon.